Poker table talk isn't harmless chatter. It's not small talk. And it's definitely not random. Poker table talk is a weapon, and if you don't understand how it works, you're the target. Every session, someone is using words to pressure you, distract you, tilt you, or push you toward a decision that benefits them, not you. Sometimes it's loud and confrontational like Eric Person. Sometimes it's subtle and needling like William Kassouf. Sometimes it's theatrical like Tony G. All with different styles, same purpose, verbal control. Today, we are going to break down exactly what poker table talk really is, why it works, and how to keep it from influencing your game. And just so you know, this video is the condensed version of a full masterclass we published inside Poker Railbird Plus. If you want the complete blueprint, every trap, every tactic, every psychological breakdown, and every defensive protocol, the full masterclass is linked below. Most players think poker table talk is just conversation, a little banter to pass the time, maybe loosen up the table, maybe break the tension. It isn't. Poker table talk is a deliberate attempt to influence the decision-making process of another player. And it works because poker is a game played by humans, not robots. Humans respond to words. They react to tone. They process emotion, ego, and pressure, often without realizing it. There are two major forms of table talk you'll hear at the table. One, intentional speech play. This is verbal strategy. It's designed to trigger a reaction, force a mistake, or extract information. Players ask questions, make comments, poke at your ego, or create verbal distractions because they're trying to shift your thought process away from pure logic and toward emotion. When someone talks to you in a big pot, it's rarely random. Two, incidental or unintentional talk. This is just as important, and potentially far more dangerous. These are the little comments people make without realizing what they're revealing. A sigh, a sudden silence, a frustrated laugh, a throwaway comment like, "I knew you'd do that." These leaks give away emotional truth, not strategic truth, and strategic players use them. Here's the key point. Whether intentional or accidental, table talk changes the psychology of the hand. It adds noise, emotion, uncertainty, and pressure, all of which interfere with clean, mathematical decision-making. Once you understand this foundation, you start to see table talk for what it really is, a tool, a probe, or a trap, depending on who's using it. To understand table talk, you first have to understand why it works. Poker is a psychological and mathematical game, played with cards. And when someone speaks to you during a hand, they tap directly into the human brain's weakest points: pressure, distraction, ego, and emotional response. Let's break these down. 1. Pressure and cognitive load. Anytime someone talks to you in a big pot, your mind now has to task switch. Instead of focusing on stack sizes, ranges, tendencies, and the story of the hand, your brain suddenly has to process their words. You don't have unlimited mental bandwidth. That tiny bit of extra load creates pressure, and pressure leads to mistakes. 2. Distraction from pure logic. Poker decisions should be based on patterns, math, and player tendencies. Table talk tries to replace that with emotion, story, or narrative. A single comment can shift your thinking from "does his range connect with this board" to "why did he say that?" The moment you're thinking about them instead of the hand, you're already losing ground. 3. Ego triggers. This is the biggest vulnerability for most players. When someone says, "Come on, you're not really going to fold that, are you?" They're not attacking your logic, they're attacking your identity. Humans respond to ego pressure long before they respond to logic. And if someone can pull you into a pride-based decision, you're dead. 4. Emotional probing. Talkers aren't always trying to trick you with what they say. Often, they're testing how you say it. A small glance, a change in tone, a delayed answer. These reveal emotional truth far more accurately than betting patterns. It's the reason why pros prefer silence. The less you reveal, the harder you are to exploit. Silence is almost always the strongest signal. Most amateurs talk to relieve tension. Most pros stay quiet to control it. Silence protects you from leaking excitement, uncertainty, or emotion. In poker, silence is not weakness. Silence is control. Understanding these psychological triggers is the key to recognizing what table talk really does and why it's so effective at the tables where people are most emotional. Next, we'll break down the types of table talk you'll encounter and the real reason each one exists. Once you start paying attention to speech at the poker table, you notice that it isn't random at all. Different players use completely different styles, but those styles fall into recognizable forms. What matters isn't the psychology inside the listener. We've already covered that, but the behavior of the talker. Their voice, rhythm, pacing, confidence, insecurity, and timing tell you exactly what they're trying to accomplish. Some players speak to draw you out, using questions that seem innocent on the surface, but are carefully timed to see how you respond. They watch where your eyes go, whether you immediately look away, whether you joke back, or whether you clamp down into silence. These players aren't trying to start a conversation, they're trying to start a reaction. Then you have the personalities who speak to establish table presence. They talk to set the pace of the game, to make the atmosphere feel like it belongs to them. They tell stories, make comments about previous hands, or keep up a steady stream of chatter simply to occupy space. The goal isn't intimidation, it's ownership. They want the table to operate inside their rhythm. Other players use their voice the way magicians use misdirection. They say things that intentionally contradict their actual position in the hand. A player who's suddenly talkative after being silent for half an hour may be projecting ease to mask tension. A player who groans or complains mid-action may be trying to steer you away from the truth. Their words act like a trail of breadcrumbs designed to lead you in the wrong direction. Some talkers prefer irritation as their main tool. They use small jabs, tiny digs, and repeated comments that wear on you over time. They don't need to be loud to be effective. They simply need to be persistent. Their goal is to make the table feel uncomfortable just long enough for someone to make a poor decision to get it over with. There are also players who use speech as pacing control. They talk during key moments not to distract your thinking internally, we discussed that earlier, but to disrupt the tempo of the hand itself. They slow the game when it suits them, speed it up when they have momentum, and insert conversation at moments that benefit their line. In their hands, speech becomes a form of timing manipulation. And finally, you have the storytellers. These are the players who talk in a way that shapes the narrative of the hand. They're guiding you toward a certain interpretation, that they're strong, that they're weak, that they're frustrated, that they're bluffing, that they're done with the hand. Their words become part of the image they're selling, and for many players, that image becomes easier to believe than the actual betting line. These forms of table talk vary widely in tone and personality, but they all serve a strategic purpose. They let you see how a player is trying to influence the moment, even if you're not yet concerned with what effect it may have on you. Recognizing these external patterns is the first step toward understanding who at the table is using speech intentionally and who's simply leaking without realizing it. To really appreciate how powerful table talk can be, you only need to look at the players who've turned it into an art form. What's fascinating is that they all use completely different styles, yet they achieve the same result. They make opponents uncomfortable, emotional, reactive, or uncertain, and that shift in psychology changes the decisions made at the table. Take Eric Persson. His style is pure confrontation. He overwhelms opponents with loud, aggressive, non-stop verbal pressure. It's not subtle, it's not polite, it's not meant to be. His goal is to drag players out of their comfort zone and force them to make decisions while emotionally off balance. Love him or hate him, his table presence changes the entire dynamic of a game. William Kassouf, on the other hand, is almost surgical. He doesn't yell or try to dominate the room. He needles. He probes. He repeats the same line just enough times to get inside your head. His rhythm, his phrasing, his timing, it's all designed to create micro-annoyances that accumulate until a player finally reacts. Kassouf doesn't need volume. He weaponizes persistence. And then there's Tony G, part entertainer, part psychological wrecking ball. His approach blends humor, shock value, and sharp timing. He can make a player feel embarrassed one moment and overconfident the next. It's theatrical, but don't mistake it for chaos. Every burst of noise, every line he drops, is calculated to disrupt your emotional stability. When you study these players side by side, you start to see how many forms table talk can take. One uses intensity, another uses irritation, another uses theatrics. They're completely different personalities, but they prove the same point. Speech changes the game. And if you're sitting across from someone who knows how to use it, you're not just playing against their cards, you're playing against their voice. Most players think table talk affects only the hand they're in. In reality, every word you speak reshapes how the table reads you, not just now, but for the rest of the session. Here's why engaging in poker table talk carries real strategic costs. 1. You unintentionally reveal patterns in your range. If you talk in some spots and fall silent in others, players begin connecting those patterns, often subconsciously. They start thinking, he talks only when he's strong. He jokes only when he's weak. Speech becomes a pattern. And once opponents lock onto a pattern, even an imagined one, they'll use it against you. 2. Talking creates timing tells. Speech changes your rhythm. You pause to answer. You act quickly when bluffing. You slow down when strong. You only respond when relaxed. Your speaking cadence becomes part of your betting cadence, and timing tells are some of the easiest tells for observant players to exploit. 3. Talking reshapes your table image. The moment you talk, people begin categorizing you. Talkative often means loose. Friendly can be interpreted as exploitable. Silent means strong. Even if these labels are wrong, they influence how opponents react to your future bets. 4. Talking gives opponents a tool to pressure you later. Once you speak in one important pot, opponents can and will reference that moment in later hands. You talked last time you had it. Why so quiet now? Engaging even once creates a reference point they can weaponize. 5. Talking destroys behavioral consistency. Strong players win through consistent timing, posture, and decision processes. Talking introduces inconsistency by definition. Inconsistency creates variance, unnecessary variance, that makes you more readable and less stable. Bottom line, talking in poker isn't harmless. It builds a behavioral footprint that spreads across the entire session, shaping your image, exposing patterns, and giving opponents new ways to pressure you. This is why the strongest players speak rarely, speak carefully, and often choose silence over participation. Silence keeps your range protected. Speech creates exposure. Recognizing these dangers is the first step. The next is learning how professionals neutralize table talk without giving away anything in return. The truth is simple. Responding to table talk in any form is one of the worst strategic mistakes a poker player can make. The moment you acknowledge a comment, answer a question, smirk at a joke, defend your play, or even make eye contact with the talker, you've just given them something they can use. You've handed over a piece of your timing, your emotional temperature, your confidence level, or your internal narrative, and none of that belongs in their hands. The correct move is absolute non-engagement. You ignore the words as if they never existed. You don't flinch, you don't react, you don't compensate with a smile or a shrug or a clever comeback. You don't reward their fishing expedition with the slightest acknowledgement. Silence is not just good etiquette, it is strategic insulation. It keeps your mental process sealed off from the chaos around you and denies opponents the feedback loop they're trying to create. But here's where strategy comes in. Although you never give them anything back, you absolutely pay attention to everything they give you. Because people who rely on table talk always reveal more than they realize. You watch how they speak, not the words, but the machinery behind the words. Their tone, their posture, their hesitation, their sudden confidence, their forced humor, the way their eyes bounce between you and the pot, the way their shoulders tense or loosen depending on whether they want a call or a fold. You study the rhythm behind their chatter. Do they talk only when relaxed? Only when nervous? Do they crack jokes when weak and go quiet when strong? Do they ask questions that betray insecurity? Do they push harder when bluffing or when holding value? Speech may be their weapon, but it's also their confession. A talking player exposes far more about themselves than they ever extract from you, but only if you remain silent long enough to observe the cracks forming in their performance. The strongest players understand this asymmetry. Talking gives away information. Listening gathers it. Engaging costs you equity. Ignoring it protects it. And the more committed the talker is to controlling the narrative, the easier it is to see the seams in a story they're trying to sell. In poker, the last thing you ever want to do is become part of someone else's script. When you stay silent, you force them into a one-man show, and eventually, every performer slips. Most players assume table talk is only dangerous when it's aimed at them. Strong players know the opposite is true. The talker reveals far more than he realizes. The words don't matter, the delivery does. Tone, pacing, confidence, hesitation, eye contact, posture, and emotional leakage tell you far more than the sentence itself. Talkers are inconsistent by nature. When they're comfortable, their speech flows. When they're uneasy, it stutters, speeds up, slows down, or feels forced. These shifts become a behavioral map. A player who jokes through every pot but suddenly quiets down during one big hand is telling you everything you need to know. Another who normally speaks calmly but becomes animated in a bluff is exposing the tension he's trying to hide. Strong hands and weak hands produce different rhythms, and talkers can't maintain those rhythms under pressure. You also learn from how the table reacts to them. Loud talkers tilt some players, loosen others, and irritate the rest. Those reactions tell you who plays emotionally, who folds too tight under noise, who loosens up just to fight back, and who can't keep their composure when the table atmosphere becomes chaotic. The talker thinks he's controlling the table, but he's actually revealing who is mentally vulnerable. And the greatest advantage of all is asymmetry. Talkers believe they're gathering information while they're actually giving it away. You stay silent and unreadable. They keep broadcasting their state of mind. They contradict themselves, overperform strength, underplay weakness, or use rehearsed lines that don't match their betting pattern. The more they talk, the easier it becomes to track the cracks in the story they're trying to sell. Strong players don't fear table talk. They weaponize it simply by letting the talker speak and watching what falls out in the process. What we've covered here is the core framework, the foundation you need to recognize table talk for what it really is and keep it from influencing your decisions. But this is only the condensed version. If you want the complete masterclass, the advanced psychological traps, the deeper breakdown of speech patterns, the behavioral protocols professionals use, and the full system for staying unreadable, I've published the entire thing inside Poker Railbird Plus. The link is below. This is Terry Wood from PokerRailbird.com, and thanks for watching. If you found value in this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, we'll see you at the tables.